The BBC's unfortunate habit of taking sides is coming home to roost. It's becoming painfully apparent that the Beeb has a problem with Israel, and therefore the regrettable conclusion could be that it has a problem with Jews. Don't take my word for it. Danny Cohen, a wildly talented television executive who I briefly served under at Channel 4, was the BBC's director of television from 2013 to 2015. Cohen is also Jewish, and writing in today's Telegraph, he said the BBC's deep-rooted prejudice is fueling the poison of anti-Semitism. He wrote, "At times of significant crisis like this, our nation's great institutions take on an increased importance. In the case of the BBC, we expect it to provide us with accurate, unbiased reporting. But the BBC's reporting of the Hamas terrorist attacks and subsequent conflict has been a failure of both journalistic credibility and public duty." Devastating stuff. He goes on, "The pain of the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust has been sharpened by the failures of our national broadcaster. And these failures have dangerous real-world consequences for Britain's Jewish community." In part, Cohen is referencing the astonishing refusal of the BBC to acknowledge the annihilation of 260 people at a music festival, the raping of women, the burning of bodies, the parading of corpses on the back of pickup trucks, and the beheading of babies as terrorism. The BBC, for the last 2 weeks, not only demonstrating prejudice and misjudgment as stars like John Simpson continue to double down, but stubbornness and arrogance as well. Well, that's what happens with public bodies who receive their money come what may. Now, why does this row over whether Hamas are terrorists actually matter? Well, because a failure to do so sends a message to the world that these atrocities are somehow part of a strategic conflict, with Hamas being just militants, principled gunmen, freedom fighters, if you like. Language matters, as does reporting. Following the devastating explosion at the Al-Alhi hospital in Gaza, killing at least 300 people, the BBC quickly speculated it was likely to be Israel, a grave error for which they've now apologised days after. It's now widely accepted that the stray rockets were launched by Islamic Jihad, Hamas's sister organisation, the ugly sister. With the BBC jumping to conclusions and wrongly pointing the finger at Israel, its partisan and erroneous reporting spread like wildfire across the world, with millions in the powder keg of the Middle East believing that Israel was responsible for the bombing of a hospital. Anti-Semitic violence and anger followed, with riots in several cities in the region. The cancellation of a series of critical diplomatic meetings with Joe Biden, no loss there, and further hatred towards Jewish people here in the West, with the woke left Be Kind crowd among supporters of Palestine in London yesterday calling for a jihad, in other words, a holy war. Charming. Since Hamas attacked Israel, Jewish schoolchildren in Britain have been advised to hide any signs of their religion, and anti-Semitic incidents in the country have increased by over 1,300%. The BBC's record on anti-Semitism is starting to look as bad as that of Jeremy Corbyn. If the BBC's biased and inaccurate reporting threatens the safety of the 300,000 British Jews that live in this country, we are in a very dark place indeed. Let me give you a quote from a top TV insider who was at the Beeb for years, who texted me earlier today about the scandal. He said, "Mark, I've got a lot to say about the BBC's lack of leadership. Can it really call itself the British Broadcasting Corporation anymore, when most of the country have lost trust in it? This rich, vast, powerful organisation, which thinks it can behave with impunity, and which thinks it can make boring, politically correct comedy shows and finger-wagging dramas and cover identity politics and fringe issues, rather than making television and radio programmes for everyone, is precipitating its own downfall. With one note, uncritical coverage of the pandemic measures, an obvious anti-Brexit bias, peddling mad woke ideology in its output, and now a perceived editorial agenda against Israel, its reputation is hanging by a thread. The BBC, which is there to bring the country together, is leaving a nation divided. Ultimately, I support the idea of the BBC, but at the moment, our national broadcaster is becoming a national embarrassment.